Hi everybody, my name is Brian Shopper from Geopath. Thank you for attending today's out-of-home office hours. This is the 12th in our series on more, the Geopath Insight Suite, and everything having to do with that. Today our webinar is going to be about our partnership with Citilabs, and we're going to give them a chance to talk a little bit about what they do and how that's working with the Geopath Insight Suite. It's a good chance for our members to get a better understanding of how that process works and how we're developing the Insight Suite itself. Today we have Dylan Mabin and Scott Fischetti of Geopath, and we have Hugh Malkin of Citilabs as well. We are going to be able to take questions along the way, so if you have any questions that pop up, you can use the feature within GoToWebinar, and we'll address those as they come. But we're going to turn it over to Dylan now.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. So just a little background on why we have our relationship with Citilabs. It all really stems from our need to have better information about traffic. Of course, most of out-of-home advertising exists on roadways where there's vehicular and pedestrian traffic. And over the years, there have been major advancements in technology and data resources to be able to drill into a more precise and a more accurate understanding of how many people are walking and traveling on various roadways, how many vehicles there are, and what the trip motivations are of those persons in those vehicles. And that is really at the core of what Citilabs has brought to this relationship. And so we're very excited to introduce them all to you. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Hugh.
Hello, everyone. So I'm with Citilabs, and Citilabs is an urban planning platform company that we've been around for about 40 years, and our software is used all around the world to predict how people move along the road. And do I have control? No. Waiting for control for the presentation. Is it? There we go. All right. Did it work now? No. Or if we just go to the next slide, no big deal.
Sure.
There we go. So Citilabs is used around the world in 2,500 cities and 70 different countries. We have 7 offices, including 3 in the US, in Sacramento, Atlanta, and Tallahassee. Next slide. And so we specialize in 3 different types of predicting how people move. So it's regional, so between cities or in an area around a city, how would people change their travel patterns if we built a bridge or a tunnel? Between neighborhoods, so what would happen if we widened a road or put it through a road diet? And then how would people exist on a specific road, and how would they change their lanes with different signaling, or within a parking lot, how would they navigate a parking lot differently? And so this is macro, meso, and micro urban planning and predicting. So we're using all of this information in the next slide, in Streetlytics. And so what is Streetlytics? Streetlytics is basically bringing this prediction to the next level, which is measuring how people move along a transit network. So this is essentially, we've just launched the average week in a year on every single road segment in the US, the volumes and speed for basically everything that is paved in the US. We've also are measuring every single journey, or the average journey, and where people live and their origins and destinations and the paths that they take on that journey. So what does this mean to Geopath? So we provide volumes, speeds, and home locations to Geopath. Next slide. So this is looking at Chicago. Larger, darker shaded roads are higher volume roads. Smaller roads are lower volume roads. Next one. And zooming in, you can see directionality. So this is, you can see who's heading north-south or east-west, and we can zoom in even greater on each road segment. There we go. So this is looking at a specific road segment. We can see the home locations and then the demographic detail from those home locations of the people who travel along that road segment. And we can measure that hourly or by different times of the day. So, and going further beyond that, we can look into origin destination matrices and also the paths between those origins and destinations. So what this means to you is we can see the changing audiences by different times of day. So if we look at a McDonald's, a specific location, so this is the destination. What were all the origins and how does that change between the breakfast crowd on the left and the lunch crowd on the right? So,
hey Hugh, we just before you go into the next section, just had a quick question back on a previous slide. That when you rank flow quality, what is the criteria for excellent, good, or poor?
So these are just examples of what the data can do, and essentially the Streetlytics is a large data set. This is our own quality assessment to speed, and this is originally geared towards urban planning. So excellent is free flowing, and poor is traffic jam. So I would assume the opposite for larger dwell times in front of out-of-home media. So there's no specific criteria, and this changes.
And one thing I want to point out to our members that are tuning in for this, one of the, in my opinion, beautiful things about the data set that we are working with Citilabs on is the ability to understand every single roadway in the entire country in relation to another. Our existing traffic count data sets used to come solely from departments of transportation. Now we're still getting a lot of that data, and that's being fed in the transportation models that Citilabs is building within Streetlytics. But what's really nice about this is that every single count is taken into context against one another, and he will get into this a little bit more detailed. But as you look at from one block to the next, and you see the intersections and the counts on those roadways, and basically every single number adds up to the sum of its parts. And so as you progress down a highway, you know exactly how many people are taking that exit, getting onto the cross street, and how many are carrying forward. And that's really, really important for us to be able to have a consistent metric for understanding audience exposure in the out-of-home world. Now, tying all that back together with the audience home location and being able to build audience demographics and behavioral profiles, it just makes out-of-home such an incredibly well-measured medium in ways that were previously impossible before this type of technology and data was able to be leveraged in the way that Citilabs has done. This data set is truly the first of its kind. It's never existed for every single roadway in the US, and we're really, really proud to have partners like Citilabs on this.
Thank you, Dylan. So going further, if we go forward a couple slides.
Sure. Also, just had another question as you were getting back to your slides on, if you could go into a little bit more on where the data is coming from, which I think is coming up.
Yeah, so we'll go into more detail about how it's made at the end. So I'm just going through a couple examples of how this can be used. So one is just understanding the volumes and speeds on specific road segments. So what is your audience and what are the demographics? And then I'm going into a little bit more depth on origins and destinations and what does it mean by understanding the path between. So this is looking at origin and destination pairs. So what is in you by time for a specific destination. And then this is looking at origins and destinations for a larger destination like downtown Orlando. So what are the neighborhoods that generally feed downtown Orlando? We're highlighting the top 10, but as you can see, there's many more origins there as well. And this is looking at one specific road segment. Where were people coming from and where were they going to in Chicago? And this, of course, can be broken down by time of day and day type as well. So is it different on a Monday versus a Sunday? And this can be done for every single road segment. And this is a specific example for out of home. So in Chicago, people who ended up at this mall in the top left corner and who also passed by this one billboard, so that image below the arrow is a Google Street View of a billboard. So where were all of their origins? So where did they start their journey and ended at that mall and also passed by this billboard? And tell us the demographics. So that's the Esri Tapestry segmentation to the right. And then below that is the impressions and how they changed seasonally. So in August it was much lower, and in December much higher, which is understandable for Christmas and the holiday shopping. So how does it work?
Just want to pause before we get into the next section. I know to give a chance to see if there's any questions from people. I know maybe we went a little fast early on, but want to see if there's any other questions or follow-ups. Cool. One question came in. Will we be able to create these custom audiences like the example who saw the mall and also who passed the unit?
Getting into that, definitely on the future roadmap, being able to tease out sort of a cross-section of people that started here, ended here, that live here, that's all available in the underlying trip data that Citilabs has built in the Streetlytics process. Right now, what we're going to be able to provide our member is the aggregate demographics and volume by time of day. Now, if you're interested in some of those more advanced capabilities, we should definitely talk, so feel free to reach out to myself, Dylan at geopath.org, and then we can connect with you on how some of that additional data can be made available to you.
Okay, absolutely. Cool. And then one other question about interested to know how on rolled up version at the standard market level, county, CBSA, DMA. So, also, sorry, I misread the question, but also interested to know on rolled up version at the standard market level, county, CBSA, or DMA.
So I think the question is talking about, how do we, at what geographic level can this data be summarized? And it's very flexible because the most granular level that this information is available is down to the census block group. Now that's done for a couple purposes. One is for, basically stability of the understanding of the audiences, but then also to make sure that we create a product that is sensitive to personal identification information and privacy. But starting with those census block groups, of which there are about 230,000 unique census block groups in the United States, those then become our building blocks. So we can roll those up to any other geographies, be it a zip code, city boundaries, counties, DMAs, CBSAs, states, regions, or even the entire United States. Because one of the other things that's important here is that these trips aren't just local trips. You're actually able to capture the understanding of how people move across the entire country. So you're not just getting local audiences or regional audiences, you're getting business travelers, tourists coming in from all across the United States, and those trips traveling on those roadways, which is, again, personally, my opinion, rather incredible, and definitely the first of its kind at scale for the entire U.S.
And then just a question on the, is the data feed live?
We have the data here at Geopath. We are currently ingesting that into our own software to be able to provide to our members in the coming months. This is what all of the new Geopath Insight suites and the Geopath ratings are going to be based upon. This is basically replacing all of the foundational data, both for vehicular and pedestrian volumes and demographics. So yeah, this will be made available in the near future.
Great, thank you.
All right, so how it works. So this is unlike any other data set ever been created, as Dylan was saying. It's combining a few different types of technologies and a few different lenses on the same movement of people on our roads. So we start with ground truth, which is essentially putting down a piece of tape on the road that we've all driven across and counting how many people cross that tape. What is the directionality? This is done on 3.5 million roadways all across the US. So this we use as a true movement on our road network. We then move into sampled movements. So this is using both GPS location from always on apps and cellular location from large cellular phone providers. This gets us to 20 to 40% of devices in a given marketplace. So this allows us to see where do these people live from this sample, where do they shop, where do they work, and what are the general patterns of travel. So we then move on to what we've done for the past 40 years in getting to what should people be traveling, where should they be going on this road network? How do they take a left turn or a right turn? So we've come up with a massive prediction for the entire US. What is the travel that should be going on? And we combine this travel with the ground truth, with the sampled movement into all three different lenses into Streetlytics. So this is the most complex mathematical process of understanding the entire population. So not just one sample, the entire population's movement on every single roadway in the US.
Thank you.
Go for it.
Oh, sorry.
No. There was a question about the mobile carriers and the mobile providers. One of the challenges about working with mobile data is the need to, well, I wouldn't say challenges. Just one of the facts about working with mobile data is that there is a utmost priority about privacy and the sources of those data. And so we are not always at liberty to disclose the individual resources. But as Hugh got into, it is a combination of various mobile carriers, US mobile carriers, top tier carriers, as well as some background app data, as well as connected car probe data. Now, all of these pieces come together to be able to provide a very robust look at the full population that is available across the entire US.
Yep, and this is just another lens on that same exact idea. All the different things that go into Streetlytics to come out with the most accurate, and we will see over in the next couple of months other DOTs and companies coming out and saying how accurate our measurements are compared to real world examples. So they're actually going off and measuring and checking the volumes that we're producing. So you will see that in the next couple of months and all throughout 2018. And that's basically it, everyone. What questions do you have? And I'll just show my information here with a thank you. And then I can turn this over to Sean.
Okay.
One of the questions here is, how do the traffic numbers account for multiple people in the car? Do you still use average counts?
So essentially we're talking about occupancy, and we're using our occupancy that we generate from multiple different government samples, government surveys, and ground truthing. So we understand not just one person in the car, but what is the general occupancy on whichever road segment for that time of day. So it's localized, it's as specific as we possibly can get, while also maintaining the scale all the way across the US.
Yeah, one of the unique nuances in this data is that we don't treat all trips and all vehicles the same. Different trips have different motivations, and the vehicular occupancy for those trips vary by time of day. by trip motivation. So, you know, the number of people that are in a vehicle when you're commuting is going to be lower than if you're going shopping, things like that.
One more question related to ground truth, just whether that collection of that data is through mobile technology.
No, it is not. That is coming from government surveys of actually laying out a physical tape on the road. And that's just one form of traffic counting.
Yeah, sorry, that's not to be confused with Ground Truth, the mobile company.
Right.
Ground Truth in its essence of actually being a method of referencing the real data on the road is what our use of the term is.
Right.
So yeah, the ground truth to us is physical. So the physical counts of what's going on.
Yeah, one of the questions is, should we expect the counts to change dramatically? Dramatically, no, but you should expect the counts to change. Our existing methods used to take, for example, let's take an interstate road. We might have a traffic count from the DOT, and the average annual daily traffic was 100,000 vehicles per day. It's a lot of people. But as we all know, after going on various trips, that the volume of roadways can vary dramatically on the northbound and southbound traffic, even over the course of a week. On some roads, you don't necessarily travel the same route home as you do when you're going to a particular destination. And so the volumes vary slightly on those roadways. So rather than just taking a 100,000 count, dividing it in half, and you get 50,000 northbound and southbound, you might be getting 45,000 northbound and 55,000 southbound. And that's an important distinction to be able to understand the context of those trips. And so not only are you going to see some variation in that regard, but then also we are having a much larger, much more stable traffic count database that's coming out of this full nationwide simulation.
Quick question on how often the data sets will be updated.
Sure. In our existing methods, we would revisit every single traffic count station periodically, not necessarily every single year. What's beautiful also about this relationship with Citilabs is that they have essentially a small army of traffic analysts that are constantly collecting this reference traffic data from DOTs across the United States, be it through sensors, be it through the strips on the road, toll booths, things like that. And so those counts are constantly coming into our system as they are made available. Now, the way that Geopath is going to be releasing data in the future is that we are always going to have our annual seasonal predictive product available, but we're also going to be continually updating that predictive metric as time goes on, as new data becomes available. Initially, it will be seasonally, and then we are going to be updating information by the month.
And so, for example, question here, but construction zones or things like that, how does our data, or how will the data account for things like that?
Sure. So one of the things that's going to occur, obviously from a planning perspective, you can only plan based upon what knowledge you have as available. But if there is a construction project, or in the case, of like a road collapse like it did in Atlanta, that will be reflected in some of the historical information once that becomes available, because those pathways, not like those people don't need to still get to their destination, it's just that those trips now are occurring on other roadways. And once that road is back up in operation, the trip product will reflect that change as well.
Mm-hmm. And just one more question on when this will be ready for mobile billboard measurement. And I think specifically to this, but also I think in general, because you talk about how we're launching this. Is it city by city, or is it across the country at the same time? Which I know the answer, but I'd like you to say it.
Sure. One of our priorities here is to make sure that we give all of our members the same advantage at the same time with the insights that are available. And so we made a cognizant effort to make sure that we rolled this out to the entire United States all at once, and that it was applicable to all audited media formats, which includes roadside and transit. One of the exciting improvements that is made available by having this refined data by roadway for the entire US is that we have traffic counts now everywhere. We don't need to wait for the process of finding out, oh, someone just built a new billboard here, let's go out and collect a DOT count if we don't already have a count station there. We essentially now have everything at the ready. So it's a matter of days, if not hours, before a traffic calculation can be reflected in the audience metrics as opposed to waiting for a couple of weeks. So we're also very excited about that. Now, as far as fleet media or mobile billboards, we are working on a method to be able to ingest that GPS data to create a predictive and historical product as well, leveraging that full nationwide street network, which is very, very exciting, and we'll be probably having an out-of-home office hours session on that early in the new year.
Great. So there's been a couple of questions on whether this presentation will be made available and where it will be made available. I just want to let everybody know that post this webinar, it will be posted on our website. If you go to the Geek Out tab of our website and scroll down, you'll find the latest webinars, out-of-home office hours, there, as well as our YouTube channel. So you can go to YouTube and search for the Geopath channel, and it will be made available there. A couple more questions just came in as well. Sorry, but I think seems like we've addressed most of them. Sorry, while we're pausing here, just want to make sure we're getting to everybody's questions in a timely fashion. It's been great. We really appreciate all I know sometimes on a webinar, it feels hard to interact and ask questions, so we do appreciate the questions that we have been getting.
So one of the questions was, what type of information are you gathering from the individual device that's integrated into this? So the individual devices, and this sort of gets into how the data is aggregated before it's put into the traffic model, is that the individual devices are able to be analyzed in a safe haven environment, one that we do not have direct access to. Our data aggregation partners are AirSage, and AirSage is working behind the firewalls of some of these carriers, as well as housing the individual device level data in their own servers. Now, what they are able to do with that individual device information is identify the travel behavior over periods of time, be able to identify place of residence, place of work, other activity points, to be able to understand the profile of those unique devices. Now, those unique devices are then able to be leveraged to understand how representative those samples are of the home neighborhood. Now, of course, no single data set exists that includes all persons. Not every single person even has a mobile phone, let alone a smartphone. And so we use the best data available to be able to understand that population level movement. And that's how we aggregate that up into what you're seeing coming out of the Streetlytics data set. Now, this is not a deterministic measurement solution. This is not saying that John Smith's mobile phone was here at this time. That was something that we explicitly did not intend to build with this. This is a probabilistic solution. So this says, on an average day in October at 2 o'clock on a Friday, how many people are traveling in these vehicles, in how many vehicles, and what was the trip motivation, where do those trips begin, where do those trips terminate, and what was the home location of those audiences. And so all that can be utilized to create an incredibly powerful out-of-home measurement solution. And we are working with other data vendors to constantly evaluate some of the device level data that you mentioned. and we'll see how that evolves over time. So we're very excited to see where everything goes.
Great. And I think that's pretty much all the questions, and just want to let everybody know about our next out-of-home office hours, which is coming up next week, actually, and it's Introduction to Squad Data. That data will be released in our O-Plan tool on Monday, December 11th, and we will be having Deborah Meyer from Squad with us, and we'll be talking about the importance of that and how to use the data and how they gather their data as well. And we'll also give a demonstration of O-Plan and where you can find the Squad data in O-Plan. But want to say thank you to everybody. We really appreciate everybody joining, and as I said a little bit earlier, all the interaction and all the questions. If you feel like you have additional questions or we didn't quite get to answer your question specifically enough, feel free to reach out to us directly at geekout@geopath.org. That's our digital helpline, and we can respond to your questions there. Again, that's geekout@geopath.org. But just again, want to say thank you to everybody, and we really appreciate your participation in today's webinar. And thank you to Hugh and Dylan today as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.